Hello, teachers. This is another video about your upcoming lesson plan, which of course goes along with your micro teaching. And yes, just for fun, I'm using that tool a little bit differently to change my appearance. Check it out. I could age and get much older, look like my father, or I could go the other way. Up, getting younger, getting really young, up, baby Dave. Now I look like my daughter. Anyway, so let's get into this. And if you're interested in knowing about this tool, I will be happy to share with you in the class. But this is a little Easter egg for you. In other words, a little hidden treat to ensure that you actually watch these videos. You can ask about this and then I can tell you about it, but you have to watch the video and then ask. All right. So I will continue as Baby Dave. And so this is your lesson plan format. This is the template that you were given, that you were assigned in Google Classroom. One of the things that I'll point out right away is, of course, you have a model, a kind of version of this in your booklet, but I've changed it a little bit for our purposes, and I'll talk about those changes a little bit here. So first off, you have your lesson topic. Now this topic can come from, as I mentioned in class, it can come from the textbook that you brought from your school, or this can be any topic that you would like to try out. So totally up to your group. And if you want any ideas, you can ask me and I'll be happy to share my thoughts. The next field is probably the most important as far as I'm concerned. It's way more important than your topic. It's your outcome. And I talk a little bit about outcome in the video about your micro teaching as well. So, starting with your outcome as you teach it's a really good idea. It keeps you focused and lets the kids know where you're headed. So what are they going to make? What are they going to do? I don't want to use the term students will be able to, but at the end of this, what kind of communicative goal will they accomplish? It's related to function, which is next. Or what ability in English will they gain from this? Sometimes an outcome is more of a creation. There's something that, like in a task-based class, maybe they make a poster, or maybe they make a presentation. So if you have questions about your outcome, please approach me in class. I will be talking to you all individually anyway. There was a question in class about the difference between language function and target language, which are our next little rows here. Your language function is the communicative goal or the thing that you're accomplishing with language, right? So the example I gave in class was maybe the language function is comparing items, right? And the outcome is, they'll be able to, compare things in a shop, right? And be able to compare things they like with things they don't like as much, or something like this. So your function would be the comparison. Your target language then could be related grammar, right? Like using the comparison in English, as well as, related vocabulary. So if you're sending the kids to the supermarket or something, it could be food-related language, food-related vocabulary as your target language. Language skills, that's the easy one. Which skills are they using in each moment, in each little manageable task that's been separated there? Sometimes, obviously, you're going to have a lot of speaking. Sometimes there might be a little reading involved, sometimes listening, Just list what you have. And by the way, we're not aiming for a certain number of skills, but a lot of the things we talk about basically include all 4 skills. So that's a pretty good goal for you. It's like, oh, when am I going to have them writing? When am I going to have them reading, listening, and speaking? Because it should happen if you follow our models and kind of apply the cooperative learning ideas, as well as possibly engage, study, activate. It's going to be all 4 skills. Task types. This is something that I've included to remind you of our first lesson, because we have many kinds of tasks, like listing and sorting, which I shared with you for both elementary and secondary levels. As a matter of fact, we didn't even finish the PowerPoint with all of those task types, which are also in your booklet, right? So I encourage you to find a task type that might fit your lesson from there, or if there's another task type you'd like to try out that's not included excuse me, in our class materials, that would be fine as well. And in your micro teaching, you could have more than one task type easily, because the goal is basically you want to have manageable tasks using the principles and the techniques that we talk about in our classes. Okay, speaking of manageable tasks, here I have your first kind of field, this little table that says phase or purpose. You could also think of that as task, right? So if you're talking about purposes and it's an engage, study, activate kind of lesson, then that first line, phase, purpose, you could just say engage, for example. Or if you have a different purpose or a different phase, maybe you're doing a PPP and that's your present, right? Or if there's another purpose, maybe, we talked about engage, but maybe if you don't want to use those terms, maybe that's your activating schema first, right? However you would like to organize this, as long as I can kind of follow the structure that you're going for. Materials, for most of these, you're not going to need, especially in the micro teaching part, as I mentioned in that other video, you don't need to create a bunch of materials. But you do need to kind of describe them here. What are the things that you think the students would need to do this? And as I mentioned in the micro teaching video, just show me a picture of your handout or materials that you're giving the kids at different moments. So you just list those there. Now your procedure, kind of step by step in this phase, in this purpose, in this manageable task. And you can see in my example in the book, there's about the level of description that you need. It doesn't have to be super duper detailed, but it should be clear kind of what's going on. Step by step, boom, boom, boom. And over on this side, you'll notice some differences to the template that you've seen in your booklet, as well as which is basically the model. But let me take you through each of these things. Time, of course, you're all experienced teachers. It's really important to include how long you think this phase would really take in a real class. Okay, so this is a good moment to point out that basically that's the difference between planning and micro teaching. When you're planning, we want to see the times for the real class. When you're micro teaching, we fast forward through that because we don't actually make the students talk, right? So time in an actual class. And as experienced teachers, you should be able to estimate approximately how long something will take. Teacher-student interaction. Um, Basically, are students talking in pairs? Is the teacher talking to individual students or the whole class at once? Are they in groups? That kind of thing. Bloom's taxonomy levels, just something that I added so we could connect Matthew's class as well. So, do you think students are going to understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create, etc., right? What do you think is happening in this level? In this stage, what level do you think they're on? And keeping in mind, of course, Bloom's taxonomy is not like a step-by-step thing. We always go understand and then apply, etc. We don't go necessarily in that order. Just kind of list the ones you think they're using. Which brings us to pies. Now, this is what in my next class with you, we're going to talk a lot about pies, which is basically one of Kagan's most useful structures for cooperative learning. We'll talk about what those letters stand for, PIES, and by the time you turn this in to me, you should have a good understanding of pies and kind of how it is happening or isn't happening in each of your manageable tasks. Okay. If you would like a separate video on pies, let me know after we talk about pies in class, because it's a very useful acronym, very useful structure. Finally, I have ICC notes, which I'm going to make that optional. You know, if you're interested in cultural knowings and you think you can do a cultural focus here, fine. You see some things related to Katie's class, that's fine. You can make notes there, because it's always good to kind of consolidate what you're learning in one place. But it's not necessarily going to be something that's relevant for every lesson, right? So ICC is there if you want to try it out, but it's not required. Okay, so that's basically what's going to go in each one of these tables. By the way, this template has 4 of them. You don't have to necessarily do all 4, which I mentioned in class. If you want to try 3, that's probably plenty for most of these, right? Thinking about the length of a real lesson in your teaching context, we're probably talking about, 50-minute hours and stuff. And so, are you going to have 4 manageable tasks in that time? Maybe, maybe not. Totally up to you. What's more, let me tell you about your rubric a little bit. You remember being a student. It's important to know your rubrics. Of course, as a teacher, you use these things, I'm sure. But in your lesson plan, it's important that, if you look at the highest level, you want to have a clear language focus. Most of the time, teachers are really thinking about practicing language, but sometimes that part is not articulated or not really outlined in the plan. So make sure there's a clear language focus, no doubt about what you're focusing on. And you want your activities to really support that. And if you think about the schedules plan and the schedules sample lesson, everything was going back to that outcome and that target language, right? So everything was pointing back towards that, their target language was going to be the going to and future will, and the outcome is they'll be able to talk about their plans for after school, and everything was pointing them in that direction. So make sure that you're connecting things logically in that kind of way. Next, we have engaging activities. Now, this is kind of a shout out to Matthew's class as well as my own, but we're really interested in students being involved and students enjoying what they're doing and students not just listening to lectures and that kind of stuff. So What activities are you including? Your interactions, of course, are going to be part of that, but that's also in the next criteria. But if you look at the highest level, all activities are designed to engage students and show purpose and understanding beyond the ideas discussed in class. So that's a pretty high standard for engaging activities. I'm sure somebody will get that level in this group. Okay. Next, we have collaboration and pies. You can think about it as your lesson 4, my lesson 2. So we're interested in um, group work, cooperative learning. In the second time we meet on Thursday, we're going to talk a lot about cooperative learning, which is related to the next part, pies. All right. So, are you trying to incorporate pies or some other cooperative learning techniques, some other cooperative learning principles? Also, at this level, excellent structure, rules, or interaction roles are given. For example, taking turns, the tallest person starts. Sometimes teachers think I'm just being silly if I say, okay, tallest person starts, or longest hair starts, or biggest hand starts. But really, these are just creative ways to engineer uh, an activity such that everybody is really involved, right? So you're going to see other ways to do that on Thursday, ways you can quickly change pairs and change roles and make sure that everybody is doing that part. Remember that positive interdependence, which I mentioned briefly on Monday, but we'll talk about again on Thursday. So make sure you're trying to include those in your plan as well as your micro teaching, which is not here, but this is about your plan. So finally, scaffolding and manageable tasks. If we look at the highest level, we have that the activities and the tasks and the steps are totally appropriate for students, and the support is well integrated, as well as Bloom's taxonomy, which is a reference to a lesson from Matthew's class, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. Could be a nice review for you. Okay, so that's what you get for the lesson plan. That's out of 20, just kind of arbitrarily. I gave it 20 points. Excuse me. And on your lesson plan, you're going to get feedback down here, strengths, areas for improvement, and it was group work, so everybody reads that. Similarly, when we come to the micro teaching, I'm going to give a kind of, we'll call it an average of what everybody does in the rubric, and then comments kind of for everybody here about the observation. Okay, so while we're in the business, let's look at your rubric for micro teaching. So the instructions, teacher talk, instructions and explanation are generally clear and suitably long. No issues with understanding. Right, so super clear what's happening. Everybody knows exactly what to do. The teacher talk, in other words, is well planned out. I'll give you an example from some other programs that I've worked in. Sometimes our trainee teachers are really good at teaching, and so they get really engaged in the planning part, and they get really excited about what they're about to teach. But sometimes that comes out so fast that there could be a little problem understanding exactly what's wanted in a particular moment. That's one kind of issue that can happen. The other one is the excellent English. I'm talking about really good English speakers that are teachers from Korea. And what can happen is basically a native speaker problem. Native speaker problem is I'm going to explain everything that's going on with my excellent English, and of course, that can lead to an issue with understanding for real students. Because why? We have to simplify that, right? We've got to simplify our excellent English so they understand the activities. That's why this is here. So feel free to, uh, if there's important instructions, feel free to plan them out a little bit. You can do it spontaneously, but if you worry that it won't be crystal clear, you might want to plan out those important instructions at least. Finally, again about Teacher Talk, it's engaging. Uh, Instructions and explanations are presented with well-balanced energy and interest. And what that means essentially is, it's not so much about understanding, but engaging Teacher Talk means we sometimes have to be cheerleaders for our students, whether they're secondary or elementary students. So sometimes we have to bring the energy, right? And that hopefully will be infectious. It will inspire our students, in other words, to also be very energetic. So we want energy in your instructions and explanations. We also want interest from the teacher in what she's doing. In other words, you're not going through the motions and you don't look bored with the process, right? You're kind of taking the time to engage the students, even though they're not going to talk back to you. That's what these things mean. And thank you for watching this video. In part of my effort to be engaging is using these silly filters and kind of aging myself to look just like my dad. All right. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched, I will see you in the Injeguan. Bye, everybody.